Okay, the small group guidelines, there's, we read them every time for open share and at our step studies, but there is in the binder, and maybe you've all seen these, the definition of what they're talking about. It's kind of an expanded version. And so we'll go through those, and then there's some helpful phrases when the guidelines are broken. How do we deal with that? How do we handle it? So the first is keep your sharing focused on your own thoughts and feelings. And it says here, not your spouses, your boyfriends, or your family members' hurts and hang-ups, but your own. Focusing on yourself will benefit your recovery as well as the ones around you. Stick to I or me statements, not you or we statements. We had a guy a couple of years ago that when he came in, and it was all about his wife and his mother-in-law, and not knowing this, we didn't quite know how to handle it, but you know, he eventually got around to talking to himself. But had we had this, we would be able to, or if we'd had a better understanding, we could have said something, you know, use I statements or refer to your own thoughts and feelings, and don't worry about other people. You're here to fix yourself, not worry about other people. Limit your sharing to 3 to 5 minutes, and that's just so that everybody has an opportunity to share and to ensure that one person doesn't dominate the group sharing. We had one guy that continually would go well over 5 minutes, and so we started timing just specifically for him. And we set the timer for 5 minutes, and for weeks he would hit the timer every time. He'd run out of time, and then all of a sudden he started cutting it short, and he was proud of himself that he was getting within the 5 minutes, and now he's usually around 3 minutes. So sometimes people just like to hear themselves talk, and so this helps to the timer. It's a lot easier to use a timer than to have somebody that's going on and on and on and saying, well, thanks for sharing, but we're going to have to move on. You know, it just embarrasses people. And we had one a few weeks ago that we hadn't been timing, and Daniel had to say, no, sorry, we're going to have to move on. Thanks for sharing. And came back to him afterwards and said, you know, it wasn't what you were sharing that was the problem, just we're running out of time. And he was okay with it, but you could tell he was a little bit embarrassed. So better to avoid that than to have to deal with it that way. There's no crosstalk. Crosstalk is when two people engage in conversation excluding all others. Each person is free to express his or her feelings without interruption. The definition is crosstalk is also making distracting comments or questions while someone is sharing, speaking to another member of the group while someone is sharing, or responding to what someone has shared during his or her time of sharing. Additional types of crosstalk, and I don't agree with this one, would be handing a tissue or a tissue box to someone who's crying during their time of sharing. This interrupts feelings, and remember that healing is in the tears. I think that's going a little bit overboard if somebody's bawling their eyes out. And, I personally don't see a problem with giving them a Kleenex just to keep from dripping all over the table and that. So we had a situation a couple of years ago where somebody shared, and one of the guys, new guy, and he was I'm not even sure if he was a Christian at the time, but he said, you know, can I ask a question about what he shared, because I don't understand it. We thought, well, what's the harm in that? And boy, we got off on a rabbit trail so fast, because one question led to another, and finally we said, okay, hold on, we're going to have to move on, and if you got any questions, just ask them in the coffee time afterwards. So we've had that happen since then, and people have asked if they can ask a question, so no, just keep it in mind and talk to them at the Crosstalk Cafe when we're having coffee, and it just makes it keeps you focused, keeps your group focused and moving on. So, and if somebody does just kind of speak out, you can just say, you know, sorry, no crosstalk. Number 3, we are here to fix one another. No, we're not. We're here to support one another, not fix one another.
That was a test, right?
This keeps us focused on our own issues. We don't give advice or solve someone else's problems in our time of sharing, or offer book referrals or counselor referrals. We're not licensed counselors, psychologists, therapists, nor are the group members. Celebrate recovery groups are not designed for this. It's up to the participants to include outside counseling to their own program when they're ready and if they're ready. I was talking to one guy and he said, the CR was really appealed to him because he needed just a place to talk. And he said, if I try to share with my wife, she's always got a book that I should read or a scripture that I should read. And he says, I don't want that. He said, I just want to be able to talk and not get any feedback. And so that's really appealing to people. So, and as far as the counseling part, Nate, who is the head of CR Mental Health, is a licensed counselor. And he says, but when I'm at CR, he says, I'm just a participant. He says, I'm not a counselor. I'm not here to try and fix anybody. We just trying to fix ourselves. Number 4. Anonymity and confidentiality are basic requirements. What is shared in the group stays in the group. The only exception is when someone threatens to injure themselves or others. Definition: we are not to share information with our spouses, family, co-workers. This means no discussing what is shared in the group among group members as well. That's gossip. So if something's going on in the group and Daniel and I just go into a corner and start talking about it, that's not acceptable either. That's becomes gossip, and unless it's a life-threatening thing, then we have to deal with it. The anonymity part as well. I don't mind if people say that I'm part of CR. I'm okay with that, but some people aren't. So if I'm with my wife and we bump into somebody that's from CR and she said, well, where do you know them from? I just say, know them from church. And it protects their anonymity. The confidentiality, if somebody shares something with you, just keep it to yourself. You don't have to be sharing it with other people. Somebody may share something in the coffee time afterwards that maybe they've never shared it with anybody else before. We have to honor and respect that confidentiality. Offensive language has no place in a Christ-centered recovery group. And definition there, we just ask you to watch your language. And the main issue is that the Lord's name is not used inappropriately. Recovery is kind of messy, and sometimes something will slip out, just for emphasis. And I don't think that that's a big deal, personally. We just don't want people dropping F-bombs every second or third word, or using the Lord's name in vain. So other than that, I'm not too hung up on that. It really isn't an issue. Once in a while in our step study, somebody will drop a word that you might think, well, that's not totally appropriate, but we just ignore it, and it's not a common thing. Also, avoid graphic descriptions. If anyone feels uncomfortable with how explicitly a speaker is sharing regarding his or her behaviors, then you may indicate so by raising your hand. The speaker will then respect your boundaries by being less specific in his or her description. This will avoid potential triggers that could cause a person to act out. Again, a couple of years ago, we had a guy that was sharing about his problem with porn, and then he started sharing about how he acted out when he was watching porn. And the leader of the group at that time said, we don't use that word here. And he said, well, the other group I'm part of doesn't have a problem with it. And he said, well, I do. So, because it's just too much information, and it made me uncomfortable. I'm glad that he dealt with it the way that he did. And I think he only came back one more time after that. But that's okay, if it's making everybody else uncomfortable, that's not a healthy thing. So I think that is all that I've got to share on that. If I guess open it up for discussion, for questions.
So how are you, we'll kind of go through a few things right from newcomers through. How many of you guys have heard, you can do it if you want, Mark. Probably let's just go into our leaders, I think, whatever you want. How many of you guys have heard the full kind of descriptions of the small group guidelines before? Okay. It's probably something, what we're trying to do too is Candace is kind of moving into a role once she's done step study of kind of overseeing Newcomers 101. She probably won't be running it every week, but she's been there quite a bit this year training with me and just how we want newcomers to go. And then she'll be putting people in place for our newcomers group. But with that, how do you feel, and obviously everyone in the room has done newcomers at one point here, but how do you feel this applies to newcomers, and how much of this do we communicate at that level with the newcomers, and then we'll get into shared groups and step studies. Did you have any thoughts on that, Candace? Put you on the spot?
Well, I think that would be a good idea to have it at that level, because then sometimes people don't make it every week. If you do it the first time, you know they've heard it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, anybody who's come has heard it at least once. I think maybe just the timing thing is fitting that into the, like.
Do you think we have time, the way we've been doing newcomers, to actually do the full?
About how far in do we usually do it? Like that, where we even just read the small version? Is that
Yeah.
a few steps in? Because I'm just wondering if it was more at the beginning. So then we did fit it in, and the other stuff where we talk about ourselves, we can kind of condense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so things to look at. Any
Yeah.
other thoughts for newcomers? Should we be doing the full version, short version?
It's probably a good idea to go through like the full version, because I mean, someone just coming off the street, even hearing that they're not supposed to take the Lord's name in vain or say vulgar things or whatnot, right? Like,
Yeah.
is probably a good idea for them to understand before they commit to going to a small group.
Yeah.
And I think part of what we want to really try and do, and especially in newcomers, is communicating where we're at and what people can expect coming back. That's part of why we're trying to initiate the follow-up calls and different things as well, so that people that sometimes come that night, they learn everything, but then they have, you know, a day later, 2 days later, that night, they're thinking, oh, what does this actually mean? What's going on? What is small group? What is share group? And we've even had people that have come for Newcomers 101 and they come back the next week, and we've spent time talking to them and said, how do you feel? Are you ready for it? And they're like, I don't know, I'm nervous. What is it about? What is it? And that's part of why we initiated the follow-up calls from leaders. And that's been going well so far. I know the people I've talked to have really appreciated that. But I think it really sets an expectation of what our group is about. Not only for these guidelines, but especially anonymity and confidentiality. There's a lot of time people come that they want to know this is safe, and what they're saying is staying in the group. We've kind of come to as a leadership team with Pastor Mark and the core team, we've kind of said it's up to each individual person to reveal if they are a part of Celebrate Recovery or not. It's not up to me to say, if I bumped into Morgan, I can't say, oh, Morgan, oh, I know her from CR. I know, like, I just outed her in a sense. If she brings it up, or, you know, now you kind of have an awkward tension because it's like, oh, do I bring it up because now I'm going to out him? And, you know, but I think it's better to just talk about yourself. And if we are bumping into someone again, church, I know them from we've had coffee a few times. I've heard people say that because of the Crosstalk Cafe, and, you know, we have coffee every week. I meet them for coffee. We're in a small group together. We're whatever they're comfortable with. But really we want each individual to be exposing themselves for CR and not ashamed. I'm not ashamed to be at CR. And I talk about it often, and I talk about it all the time. I put it on my Facebook. But again, I'm not, even some of the online stuff we've been doing, I'll post things, and I don't say, oh, see you tonight, see you, you know, like people that, unless we're in a group community. I know Amy's part of our recovery community on Facebook and different things that we're doing, but, you know, on my public one, people can like, comment, whatever, but I don't see you tonight there. Like, I don't out people. I just say, I'm going to be there. And if other people want to expose that themselves, that's up to them as well. So how does this now affect our open share groups? And I know the guys group, obviously, because I'm in there a bit, but more the ladies. Do we read these every week?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And do you find we have any issues with them? Do you guys have certain ones that we have problems with, or?
The odd swear word might come out, nothing that I would be
And that's
concerned
probably
about.
just me.
There's you and one other.
And
To be honest,
occasionally,
it's not anything offensive.
no, and occasionally you'll move away from I
Yeah.
to like with the girls. Sometimes they wanna start a conversation. Like I'll say something and then the next person will go, well, I just want to comment on what you said because right, and no.
Yeah.
But it's always related to something that's going on in their own lives, so
Yeah.
I just kind of let it go.
Yeah.
Because I think they're just trying to figure out like what that means in their mind. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's a balance, like there's really, because in the guys group we do have that sometimes, and some groups don't allow that at all. Like they call it piggybacking, right? I'm just thinking about what he said, and sometimes they can turn it into their own selves. In the guys group we have probably the biggest issue would probably be the I and me statements. Guys like to transfer into we, us, talking about the collective group instead of really dealing with the personal. And that's, this isn't, these guidelines, group guidelines, I don't want to be so firm where, like Richard said, we're not even handing a Kleenex to someone who's crying.
Yeah.
And some groups do go that extreme and maybe they need it. I don't think that fits what we're trying to do here at Livingstone's.
We
this
hand out
is-
Kleenex all the time.
That's right. And even in Newcomers 101, we've had so many nights where people show up and we share a little bit and they start bawling their heads off.
And we haven't got a box of Kleenex.
And we get up and get the Kleenex. Morgan's been there. And I think there's a difference between you're going through something and we're here to support you
Yeah.
versus the guy in the corner that's maybe blowing his nose every single week. He has his own, it becomes a distraction versus a support. And really the biggest thing here is we're about people. That's why, a swear word, it's not like, oh, you said a bad word, don't say that. This is about people. And it's messy. Life's messy. Recovery's messy. But we want to help people move forward in their journey and in their faith to wholeness. I don't believe that when you come in, the problems you come in, you have to be stuck with now for the rest of your life. I love that Amy, I love that Richard, I love that you guys are saying, and I have overcome these things. Because just in saying that, it gives our group hope. This isn't I'm a drug addict that now I'm always a drug addict. No. And CR doesn't even believe that. I am a child of God, changed by grace. And I have overcome, or I am still struggling with, or I'm working through, whatever, but we do overcome.
Yeah, we find our identity in Christ.
Absolutely.
And that's why we are not what we're here for.
That's right.
That's what CR is about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I know last leaders meeting we talked about the timers. Have you guys tried it at all? Okay. No, that's not a problem.
We usually get like 3 questions.
And that's good. If you guys are doing time, I'm not picky about it. Like, the point of this, again, is these are guidelines. And in my mind, I feel like if suddenly we grew in one night or someone's sick or away, and we've had people like Janice who now have said, I'll step up and co-lead a group for the night because we don't have enough leaders. I want her to feel comfortable in going, I know how this system works, and be able to just take a group if needed without her being stressed to the max. What do I do? How do I? Because it's the same in all our groups. I was at Crossroads, not this Friday, last Friday, and I just started asking leaders about some of these groups because I know we're talking about these things and guidelines, and 2 out of 3 of the girls' groups use a timer. One of them doesn't because they only usually have 4 to 6 people at the most. It's one of their smaller groups, and they've never had an issue with time. Their leader for that group is aware that if someone starts rambling, and she's more the person to just go, okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we want other people to share too. but they've hardly done that. The other two girls groups do a timer, and the guys groups do a timer as well. If you find people are rambling, like I am right now, but like Richard said, it kind of takes the personal out of it. Because sometimes if the same leader is always going, oh, thank you, we're out of time, you can sometimes cause a personal problem there where there begins to be a resentment against that leader. Versus if there's a timer that goes off, people do feel like it's inanimate. It's not a person that said it, and a different person can hold the timer every time. Again, these aren't rules, these are guidelines.
What we've done in the men's is there are times when I don't use a timer because I know the guys that are in the group. But there's about 3 different guys that if they're there, I know we need to have a timer because they're going to go on and on and on and on. And we tell them, when the timer goes off, you don't have to quit talking right away, but take maybe 10 seconds to wrap it up. After most guys are, after 2 or 3 minutes, they've said what they want to say, and it's done. After that, it's just rambling. And a lot of times, if it goes to that 5 minutes, it's rambling, it's off topic. But when they know that there's a timer, they generally wrap it up a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
And we have a look at it, we see how big the group is, and then we decide how long we're going to set the timer for.
Yeah.
If we've got 12 guys, we'll say, okay, we're going to set it for 3 minutes. And if we've only got 4 or 5 guys, then we'll run it for 5 minutes.
Yeah. And we communicate that, every time. And sometimes we'll do more rounds, and then we'll go, okay, this time we're putting 1 minute on the timer. We're putting, because sometimes we do some lightning rounds in the guys sometimes. We're literally, you got 1 minute. This isn't a hard question, so get to the point, right?
We cheat a little bit once in a while too. If there's somebody that's really, maybe they haven't shared before, and they're finally got to the point where they're sharing some real heartfelt stuff, and you don't want to break that, we'll stop the timer and give them an extra minute or so just to share. And we've been caught on that a couple of times, but
yeah, people watching as you're pushing pause.
But that's a judgment call.
Yeah,
and it doesn't happen that often, but once in a while.
And last thing with this then, because I think step studies, does this affect step studies? Do you guys do the guidelines at the step study as well, or?
Every couple of weeks, we don't
Okay.
do it every week.
And you guys have a smaller group?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's 2 sides to this. One, again, is for the people in the group right now, who obviously have heard it every week, and and then the other side of it is really our step studies especially are supposed to be a training ground for future leaders. So where we begin to slack, the next generation of leaders will also begin to slack, and then pretty soon you have a program that doesn't look like Celebrate Recovery. And so I would encourage you, sometimes we even say, like when we do our intros with the guys, we do our guidelines, we remind them, this isn't just, we obviously all know each other's names. We all know why we're here, but this is training, because if all of a sudden I need, and I pull people out sometimes, if I need this guy in the group, if I need this guy in the group, if you have to lead a guys group, are you ready to do it? And then they suddenly realize, like, whoa, this is real, and now some of those guys were having co-lead and they're getting it. So I'm not against, like, you have to do it every week. But I would love to see in all our groups, our share groups, our step studies, just reminding people that this is training, that we could grow, and we want to be ready for that. And that's what I'm going to share a little bit in a minute. But Pastor Mark, any thoughts on guidelines?
No, I think it's great, and I love the balance. And like this whole CR group, by the sounds of the difference between here and Crossroads is this is really kind of a community feeling kind of group, and the way you're talking about the step studies is that way. It's looser, it's a little freer, it's not restricted, and yet there's boundaries, but there's just discernment allowed to be used, which is a good, healthy thing, I think, because I think that's what the church, Christian life is all about.
Yeah.
Grace, yet boundaries, because that's all needed in place. So I think it's great.
Awesome.
And I think if the time comes where somebody is continually breaking the guidelines, rather than centering them out in a meeting, is taking them aside afterwards and saying, okay, look, you're a little bit offside here.
Yeah.
And, because we want to extend grace.
Yeah.
We don't want to embarrass people.
And that's great. And I think I'll add into that. I'm going to piggyback off of you here, Richard. I'm going to break the rules. But you know, I think as groups in whatever setting we're in, whether it's newcomers, our share groups, or our step study, one of the things we found with the guys that works, especially I and me statements or time, whatever's kind of going off, we'll address it to the group generally at first. You know, hey guys, great sharing tonight. Really appreciate you all here. I just want to remind each and every one of us for the future, we're not pointing anyone out. We want to focus on I and me statements. We heard tonight maybe a few we's and us and they and thems. We really want this to be a personal time of healing. Now, if we see that continue, we've pulled people to the side and said, hey, just so you're aware, you know, we had one guy, this is not an issue we deal with a lot, but the crosstalk, which really just means anything that's a distraction from the person sharing and people hearing. And we had one guy for a couple of weeks, he's taking notes. And he was doing it for himself because he's eager and he wants to learn. And he was trying to, you know, it wasn't about what people were sharing, it was about what he felt was poking at him. But we had to say to him, you know, unfortunately in these groups you can't take notes. Because people are sharing raw feelings, emotions, and people don't know what you're writing down. It plays with the mind. Like, why is that guy writing every time I talk?
They might not just then stop.
Yeah.
We kicked a girl out of group because of that in jail.
Yeah.
Because she refused to stop taking notes, and it was we were doing step study, and we would break off. So it's a little bit different than we do here. So our step study, there's about 20 girls there, and so when we would go through our answers to our questions, we would break into like little groups of like 4 or 5, right? And she would sit and take notes when everyone was writing, and we said, you can't do that. You're making everyone nervous. They think you're writing down their answers.
That's
or
right.
like tracking their what's happening in their life. And she said, well, I have to take notes. This is how I learn. And she just absolutely refused to stop doing it. So we had to say, no, you can't come back anymore. Yeah. And I think there's solutions. You know, we did with our step study, we did after every question or couple questions, we began to allow a little bit of discussion about that. And then we even allowed people to take a couple quick notes. You know, if there's something you got to jot down for this week, write it down now. And then we'd move on. And even with this gentleman in our group who was taking notes, I watch him sometimes and I find he's very ordered. And so even in his sharing, when the question comes, he has it in his notes already from the lesson. So he has his notes there, but he'll read from his notes some of what he wanted to share in group. And I'm okay with that, but now I've noticed as it comes around, the way he'll do it is sometimes when it's his turn, he'll take a minute and he'll maybe just jot 1 or 2 quick things down that he's thinking about, and then he puts it down when everyone else is sharing, and he just shares. So we've kind of been okay with that because he's not doing it while others are speaking. But again, it's all on the dynamic of your group. If you guys have people that are dealing with trust issues, things like that, you probably gotta push it a little further, right? Like, you gotta build trust. You gotta earn trust. So awesome, that's great discussion, guys. Any other thoughts, feelings, comments?
Well, I just think that sometimes with guidelines, you have to make allowance for people who are in a bad place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know one night we had someone who was feeling suicide. So we all just stopped everything and we all gathered around that individual and we prayed.
Yes.
To me, that has to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would never say no.
Okay.
I think an issue can occur if we're just always in a place of, the guidelines are kind of just off to the side.
Yeah.
And this is, we just care about people so much that we lose structure. But we also don't want so much structure that we don't care about people.
I think that really helped too, because there was quite a few like newer ladies and then like the old schooler ones,
Yeah.
and everyone just kind of came together and prayed, and like you could see like some of the newer ladies were like tearing up, and everyone, and so it was like a real girly moment where everyone kind of banded together. Like it was really good for the group, I think.
Yeah.
I think it helped, by them doing that action, it helped them trust
Yeah.
to be a part of that group
Yeah.
more.
Yes.
Show that
agree.
we support,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, you know,
And-
that's the main thing that we're about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it was really nice.
Sure.
Their guidelines are not rules.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're just
Yeah.
something to
okay.
guide us. to kind of-
And
Yeah.
she had a newcomer she was here 2 weeks ago, and then she came last weekend, and then she came in and seen me Thursday, I think it was, and she just loved it. She just
Wow.
thought it was the greatest. And she's been struggling and stuff. She's raised in a Catholic church, and that's her biggest problem is the legalism of the Catholic Church and the beating yourself, and it's just amazing. But she come in, had great questions, left really encouraged, loves the CR, and she's living way far away. She drives like you. It's like she plans on coming.
Wow.
So it's pretty neat. Cool. She's got a good husband who's driving her and speaks highly of him. So it's pretty neat what she's doing.
Wow. We're changing lives. You know, we really are. And want you guys